Welcome to the Turn One Studio podcast. I'm Eliud Custodio with Turn One Studio, and here we sit with local business professionals. Today's guest is Wayne Schatzel, the member account manager. Did I get that right?
You got that right.
Of the HIA-LI and a business coach. Welcome.
Thank you. The little twist here is we're gonna turn the tables on Eliud today, and I want to ask Eliud questions.
I'm the guest this time. All right. Shoot, let's do this.
All right. So obviously, you've been doing the marketing thing for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
You went to school for this, I'm assuming.
I went to school for computer graphic design.
Okay.
That was the actual computer was a distinction back
So
then.
back then, were they monochrome?
Right. We had to do
screens?
everything in black and white and inkwells and construction paper and scissors.
Okay. Excellent. So from graphic design, how'd you get into marketing? Because that's a little bit more, I could say, more involved than just designing something graphically.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, and I've told the story, once or twice before. I had so when I was in college, one of my classes in the art major was Quark Express, which was a layout program that still exists. We don't use it as much these days. We use Adobe InDesign more, but back then Quark was a big deal. Predated InDesign. For whatever reason, and I don't remember why, my Quark teacher was into HTML, kind of took me under her wing and taught me how to do that, at least just enough to whet my appetite so I could run with it.
Right.
And then from there, I come from an entrepreneurial family, so my father kind of ushered me towards incorporation and starting a business. So at the time, the business offered graphic design, it offered website development, it even offered computer repair, because I used to build computers through high school.
Okay.
That part was short-lived. I didn't enjoy that part as much, but getting into the marketing space allowed me to do a lot of the creative stuff, both print and digital, and it just kind of took off from there.
Okay. So you were doing websites, and as things change, right? So this is the internet was really first coming out, and then you had social media. How did you develop into what we see today?
It was developed a good word, because it was an evolution. So I've always been into photography. I took photography in high school. My dad was a photographer, amateur, but was very much into it. So he got me started with photography, film photography. In high school, I learned how to develop film and work a darkroom. I continued that in college. In college, I was introduced to a video class. I did a bit of that, but none of that, the video part was not a early adoption into the early business. The internet was too young, and while I thought video was cool, it didn't have a practical application yet, right? Bandwidth was too low. Cellular service was awful. You couldn't stream videos. So that didn't become, in my world of working with small businesses, it didn't become a commercially viable product to offer for probably a good 10 years after I started in 98. So the same applies with social media, because social media didn't exist. I was actually, on a personal level, very resistant to social media. I never got into MySpace and Facebook. I was kind of kicking and screaming. But once we got past the personal use of it and I saw the commercial application, then I got it. And then it became, in time, an offering. It was something that I wanted to offer. I tried to offer, and the world wasn't quite ready for that yet. A lot of businesses didn't see the value of having a social media presence for a while after that, but eventually they did. Same thing with email marketing and eventually deeper video production and the podcast stuff that we do too.
Right. So when I think of marketing, I think about strategy. It's very similar to me as a coach, right? You're trying to create a future existence and using strategies to get there. You learned all the tactics first. When did you start really developing strategy?
I think it that too was part of the evolution, right? So that came when we had multiple offerings that clients would take advantage of, because then I kind of realized they were using me like a consultant before I realized that I was actually a consultant. Hey, you've done a bunch of websites with clients before, blah, 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 blah. And I would realize, oh, wait, I actually have. So I have learned some of these roadblocks that they're trying to avoid. And it just became something that was easier to talk about in time. So between doing that for them, doing that for my own business, I had another business along the way also that I learned a lot from as well. The strategy aspect started to come together. One of the things that I always value, one of the things that I think is undervalued with marketing is if you don't have a understanding or experience running a business of any size, you could still do marketing for people, but it's much different than if you do have that level of experience. You're looking at the business that you're doing marketing for, that you're representing, through a much different lens, because you've been there, right? You could put yourself in the shoes of the business owner and understand really what it means to be mindful of budget and be mindful of the other things that are non-marketing related that have an impact on their willingness and understanding to do certain marketing and just running the business in general. It allows you to be a lot more empathetic. So since I've run a business for a while and had that additional business, it just kind of came together.
It's funny because a lot of companies, especially when they're starting out, they try to do this themselves, right? Mm-hmm. And obviously that's not one of their talents, so they struggle with that. Over time, you've worked with established companies, and what do you find that the biggest challenge is when you're working for maybe early stage businesses that are trying to get their message out there across several different platforms? How do you segment that out?
Yeah, well, I think you hit the nail on the head with the DIY aspect and people trying to do everything themselves. And, I don't want to say I was a victim of that, but I was a victim of that as well, right? You work within the budget that you have and you try your best to do as much as you can to get the business to where it has to be. Marketing is one of those things. Trying to figure out QuickBooks is another one of those things. Figuring out your website host or how to negotiate for office space or any of those things. When you're first starting out, you are on your own, and the knowledge you gain allows hindsight to be 20/20. I could look back and say, well, I probably could have done things differently, but that's based on what I know today. I think that you have to go through that process because you don't know what you don't know, and you realize I didn't know that, and I learned that over time. So when I'm dealing with less mature businesses, we'll call it, marketing, unfortunately, is one of those things that they undervalue the importance of finding an expert for. And I guess in any business, you can kind of say that about the thing that applies to you, but I really do believe that with marketing, because marketing has a direct impact on their opportunity to build brand awareness and ultimately drive revenue. Another thing that I see them trip up on when times get tough, sometimes marketing is the first thing that they cut. It's funny because if times are tough, you want to find more business. The last thing you should be cutting is marketing. But sometimes they just don't see it, or they haven't been doing it enough to get it. A lot of marketing takes time. I always say that marketing, if you want to distill its definition, is building relationships. Relationships always take time. You can't just go out and say, I'm going to make a friend today, and that's going to be my best friend. It takes time. And when you're trying to do that with your brand and your business, and it's an entity, it's the same process. You're building friends with either clients or potential clients. That process takes time. So, that's a common misstep I see.
So you talk about taking time. We have a society that's more about instant gratification, right? Mm-hmm. So I can go and grab my camera and I can make a video and put all this stuff on YouTube, and I can go out there and create content. Yeah. But it still doesn't always, translate into clients and dollars. So how do you combat that?
It's a funny time because the grassroots efforts of that kind of content creation work sometimes. Everything kind of works sometimes. And sometimes that variable is what you do, the industry that you're in, and more importantly, the audience that you're trying to attract. If you're if the essence of your brand is grassrootsy, then doing those vlog style, off the cuff, dirty t-shirt, whatever, casual type videos, that actually might work really well for your audience. And I think we've seen enough success with that it confuses people in thinking that, well, that worked for them, so it must be able to work for me. And the truth of the matter is that can work for them. And if your business is really like that, then maybe it could work for you. Don't confuse that effortless vibe for lack of strategy. A lot of those people, especially the YouTubers, the reason why they're successful in building an audience and making a business out of being on YouTube, as one example, is that they really are smart. Like, they put effort in. They've also put in many years, and they learned over time. But before I go down that tangent, the other side of that, a more operationally mature business, marketing has... So here's a phrase I often use when it comes to website design, but I think it applies to a lot of things that involve aesthetics. I would let people know that website aesthetics are important because a great website could make a really garbage company look terrific. The opposite of that is that a poorly designed, poorly constructed, poor experience website can take a terrific brand and throw it in the trash, right? It's that powerful. And when it comes to established companies that are trying to work with established companies, perhaps companies that their widget is a higher price point, or they want to work at a market level that's higher than their competitors, it can work against you to have sloppy content, whether that's the cheap phone video, poor audio, etc. So I think, it's not one size fits all with marketing regardless of the medium, and I think that's important for people to realize.
It almost plugs in two different things, right? So people don't want to spend the money on marketing, right? Because of that, I'm spending all this money out and not getting it back fast enough, right? Because it takes some time. So I see a lot of this, and I'm sure you see a lot more than I do. People have built a website, and now they're doing maybe email marketing campaigns, and now they want to do social media. And over time, their website has become quite stale.
Yeah.
How do you address that with people?
Yeah. That's common when you're working with small businesses. And it's common not just because they may not be paying attention, but because their budget's only so big, right? They spent X on the website. That was a hurdle, especially the first time they do it in a newer business. But they did that. They got over that hurdle. Now they understand, well, I need to market this thing. Just because it's there, that doesn't mean people are going to find it. So I'm going to dabble with email. I'm going to dabble with social. I'm going to dabble with video. I'm going to dabble with whatever. It is easy to neglect the website. When you're trying all these other things, it's out of sight, out of mind. And again, you're absorbing budget for this stuff. You're forgetting to pay attention to that. The analogy I give is a wheel with a hub in the center, right? The wheel, all those spokes represent all the things you can do in marketing. Again, social, email, video, print campaigns, ads, commercials, whatever. But in the center is the website. And sometimes that's obvious when I say that. Sometimes it's not. Some people have built their brand on, say, Instagram, and that's where everything is. And they love it, and it's great. And I remind them, well, you don't own Instagram. What happens if your account gets shut down, hacked, or the platform goes out of business? They get bought by another company. The algorithm changes. Whatever. It's just out of your control. You should still be there. That should be part of your mix for most companies. But that shouldn't be the hub of your communications. That should be your website.
Right. It's funny because you look at the website and that they're not matching everything else. And I know there's a cost involved, but you'd mentioned branding. Mm-hmm. You look one way on social media, you look a different way on your website. I know personally as a consumer, I look at that and I'm like, well, what is this company really? And if they're not updating the stuff on their website or it doesn't match what their offer is, a lot of times it turns me off because then I'm dealing with a smaller company, right? Mm-hmm. Who's not really on top of things. And that just sends a psychological message. How do you address that?
So, I mean, that is a branding challenge. or I should say a branding solution. The solution is branding in that scenario. It's funny. A lot of the stuff like branding that we talk about is on the surface pretty basic, right? If I explain to you, well, you should have continuity behind the things that you put out in the public space, whether that's a consistent logo, consistent colors, a consistent voice in the words, the copy that you put out there. If I say that to you as a business owner, you're like, yeah, no, I get that. Are you practicing that? The answer is usually no. And if we talked about just let's do that as an exercise, right? Let's whether it's Turn One Studio or someone else, it pay to have that done. There's sometimes a resistance. I don't know, what we've been doing is working. I don't know if I want to waste money on that. If I hear that, that's kind of an indicator that they're misunderstanding how dollars in marketing work, meaning that it should be viewed as an investment. It's not an expense. The difference is we're not buying copy toner or paper or whatever. I'm not buying K-cups for our coffee machine. Those are expenses that come with running a business. They're not investments because I don't intend on spending money on that K-cup and getting any money in return. Marketing is about putting dollars in and expecting dollars to come back. Branding is one of those things. I'm going to write that check because that's an investment that I know I'm going to see returns for. So here's an example. I'm not just a marketer saying that. If I'm putting out 10 social media posts and I'm paying someone to do that, and I'm putting out an email and I'm paying someone to do that, and I'm doing, fill in the blank, a video, and I'm paying someone to do that. If those three types of elements don't match my brand, they are considerably less effective than if they do. I'm oversimplifying it, but it's less effective if they don't all match my aesthetic. In other words, in a silo, if I saw just the post or just the email or just the video, I may not connect it with my brand. Mm-hmm. Now, I've spent money on the video, I spent the money on the email, and I spent the money on social media. I am putting that expense, that investment at risk. I'm not maximizing that investment because I didn't take the time to make sure that the branding continuity was in place.
Right.
So I'm protecting the dollars that I'm already spending because I want to get more of a return on that. I want to increase the opportunity for anyone who saw any of those to know that it's me. I hope that explanation makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I see that in obviously small companies, you see a lot more of that, but I see that in larger companies too, which is kind of surprising. I mean, if you look at the Coca-Colas, the Apples out there, they spend millions on that, right? So obviously, they have all the intellectual property and they've tested it. They know that this works. Mm-hmm. And I guess it's harder for a smaller company to kind of keep up.
Well, with small businesses, you're building the plane while you're flying it. So I get it. I think that even for larger companies, if they're in growth mode or just trying to do more, bigger, better of what they do, they kind of fall in that same category too. And you forget. It's a basic thing. You're kind of beyond the basics. And also with a larger company, sometimes the person that comes in that's responsible for marketing comes in after the company's already been established, right? It's a legacy brand that they're stewarding and trying to do things with.
Right.
And then, of course, with that, you have the usual politics aside, you have the usual struggles within a business like that of, well, this has worked for us. It got us from here to here. I'm not sure I want you messing with the logo, the brand palette, how we word things, and they're afraid to change because they feel like it's going to put stuff at risk. So I get why it happens.
You mean like a Cracker Barrel kind of situation?
A Cracker Barrel is a good example, right? But regardless of what's holding you back, you still have to consider all of that stuff. Even if you aren't going to change a brand like a Cracker Barrel situation, you still need to establish what that brand is and have guidelines for it so that everything else that you do follows that. It's not about doing it anew as much as if you need to, sure. But if you have it, let's document that and actually make sure that everything is reading from the same hymn book. That's really the idea.
Right. I guess, at that point, you really do your clients really align with the brand, right? Whether it's, again, politics aside, if you take an Aunt Jemima off the label, or they like they did with Land O'Lakes or some that type of thing, or even like we said, Cracker Barrel. Is their customer base? Do they care?
Well, it's interesting, and I don't know the ins and outs of Cracker Barrel. I don't work there, right? But it begs the question, well, why did they do it? Why did they try something new? Usually when companies try something new, they're trying to get a new market. If they're trying to get a new market, it's often because the current market, they're seeing a decline with. Maybe because it's a legacy brand, maybe there's just attrition through age, people dying out. Or the newer generation didn't think Cracker Barrel was cool enough to patronize. I don't know what it was, but when they made the switch to a newer, hipper version, their world exploded. So
I don't know. Maybe I'm a little more cynical. Maybe they made the change knowing that they're going to go back to the original logo and all that anyway. So they just
any press is good press.
A whole bunch of buzz
Yeah.
over Cracker Barrel, and there were people going back to Cracker Barrel to see what all the hype's about. I don't know.
It's certainly possible. That would be a cynical.
That is a strategy, right? So
it is a strategy. It's a high risk strategy.
Yeah, sure.
But anything's possible.
Who knows? Who knows? So now, as a small business, you are a small business, and I see you all over the place, obviously, on social media. I mean, how do you market for yourself?
Social media is a big aspect of what we do for ourselves. It took me a little while to feel comfortable putting up as much content with me in it. I had to get over that. I admit that. But what got me over it was actually pretty easy. I realized, in regards to content with your own face in it, that usually garners more engagement than other things, right? Because people recognize you. But we're big proponents for practicing what we preach. So very often what I'm recommending for other clients, while the recipe in the cocktail wouldn't necessarily be the same for client A as it is for client B, we're still pulling from the same tool chest that we pull from. So we're active on social media. We're active with email newsletters. We're active with a video program. We're even active with print mailers and that sort of older school way of marketing, only because the type of clients that we're trying to attract resonate with all of those mediums. And we also acknowledge that not everyone is going to see everything. So we need to do more. We need to employ more than one tactic in order to get to who our avatar really is. And we also recognize that within that buyer's journey concept, not everyone who sees our stuff today is a buyer for that today. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily because we didn't do a good job marketing to them, but they're just not in that space yet. So a lot of the early stuff, the early journey stuff, is buyer awareness practice versus conversion stuff that comes later on. So yeah, we do a bunch of different things and we enjoy that. And I enjoy telling people, we practice what we preach and here's what we're doing.
Right. And obviously the podcasting has become a big deal. Mm-hmm. You got this office purposely to have a podcast studio.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've seen over the time that you've been doing this is, it's great to have the studio, the cameras, the staff, all the people that are doing all this stuff. But the one skill that you are phenomenal at is the interview. Where did that come from? Because you talk to dignitaries, business people, and you just seem to have that right flow of questions. Where did that come from?
Where did that come from? It's probably a mixture of not always knowing how big a deal the person is that I'm interviewing. That helps, right? As far as being nervous or whatnot. That's an ignorance is bliss moment. I spent decades in magazine publishing. And while I was on the graphic side of that, as the art director, the creative director, you're interfacing with the editorial department all the time. So I was around people that knew how to ask questions, how to interview, and how to convert that into a narrative. Most importantly, the real answer is active listening. I don't really prepare for the interviews that we do, and I do that intentionally. Part of it is I am short on time, but the real reason is that I just want to listen, and it forces me to listen. When I was doing this at first, I would worry about, while the person's talking, what I'm going to ask next. And yeah, I guess every once in a while that still pops up, but most of the time it doesn't. As long as I listen to what you say and I take a genuine interest in what you're saying, I could usually have a follow-up question because I want to know the answer. Okay. So that's kind of how that came to be. And then practice makes perfect, right? The more of these that I did, the more comfortable I became,
right.
The less in my head I was about it, and I worried less about the outcome. I've done enough of these where the outcome was positive and the quality was good, so I don't worry about that as much. It just kind of flows.
Okay, on the quality side of things, now you've done a couple ad hoc at an event, do a podcast, and you have no control over the environment.
Yeah.
How's that been for you?
That's fun. That's fun in the editing room, right? You're there and you're doing your camera settings, you're doing your lighting, you're doing your mic checks. There are variables that are out of your control, but you don't really know what you have until you're back in the office. You download all the cards, all the footage to the server, you load it up into your editor, and you realize, that background noise was really loud, or that camera was a little, the framing wasn't exactly how I would do it. The answer is that you just roll with it. Again, this isn't my first rodeo, so what I learned from doing that earlier on was, well, maybe I'm going to frame that with the camera from a visual standpoint a hair wider, so I have some latitude to crop a little in post. We shoot with very high quality cameras, so I have enough material resolution to do that sort of stuff. And they say shooting for the edit. I shoot for the edit, right? Because I know what the editing process is going to be like, so I'm making sure I capture for that.
Right.
And same thing with the sound, as best as I can. I picked up some newer mics not too long ago that also record internally and record with this technology that creates a lot more flexibility in post, kind of like shooting raw if you're a photographer. So anyway, that kind of stuff allows me to manage the unmanageable.
Okay, very cool. I know in your podcast you always flip it around to say, let's tell me something about what you do for fun. But I know you're a car guy.
Everyone knows I'm a car guy.
Everybody knows you're a car guy. But all your car enthusiastic side is more the foreign cars.
Not always.
Not always. What's your American Muscle favorite car?
Favorite's always a tough one. So I actually started with American Muscle. My dad is a big car guy, and he got my brother and my sister and myself into cars at a young age. The story goes when I was born, they had a 71 Mustang Mach 1, red with black stripes, and then...
I had that car.
Did you?
Yeah, I did.
They got rid of that for a van, and the concession was it had side pipes. It was a van with side pipes. There was the 70s, and that was the end of his cool car for a while because he had me, and then the other kids came around. So, but my first collector car was a '67 Mustang.
Okay.
And it just kind of went from there. I had another '67 Mustang, which is a whole nother story. Where we had two, a Corvette, a '76 Corvette. My first car was an '85 Cavalier, which is the gift of an aunt, and yeah, that just kind of kicked it off.
All right, excellent. Well, I was going to ask you about the boxing because they just had the fight for charity last night.
Yeah.
So a friend of mine, Rob Madden, actually was fighting in that fight last night. And I pull up from 2017, Eliud, the Vortex Custodio. Tell me about that.
So you didn't know about that?
I did not know about that.
Oh, that's a cool
look,
surprise.
some new stuff. All right, cool.
Yeah, I saw Vinny was a boxer too.
Okay.
I saw that on LinkedIn yesterday. I didn't know that either. I think he was 2 years before I was, but I was 2017. So when I was younger, I never never joined a gym or anything. And in my late 30s, I was driving to work on Jericho Turnpike, and the light in front of the firehouse turned red. So I was stopped on Jericho Turnpike at a spot I'd never stopped at before, right? Waiting for the fire trucks to go. And I look to my right, and I see this building, and I see just dozens of heavy bags hanging. And I thought, oh, they sell heavy bags. That's cool. And I noted the name of the building. It said LA Boxing. And when I got to my office, I opened it up on the computer. I thought it'd be fun to get a heavy bag at home just because. And I learned they don't sell heavy bags. They're a boxing gym. So I happened to mention this to my wife. To my surprise, she was totally into it. She's like, oh, we were talking about joining a gym at some point. Why don't we look into that? I'm like, all right. So we went down there that Saturday, signed up. We took the trial class, enjoyed it. We signed up, and then we did that for years. We befriended a trainer there who in 2016, or maybe 2015, but I think 2016, she fought in the Fight for Charity. And we went as guests and thought, this is cool. 1,500 screaming Long Islanders inside the Hilton Long Island, a ring, and all this crazy, and people are hitting each other. Like, that's cool. So the next year, she put out on social media, hey, does anyone want to do this? We were sitting on the couch, I was scrolling through my phone, we were watching TV, and I said, huh. My wife said, you could do that. I said, you know what? I could do that. And again, another ignorance is bliss moment. I text her on the spot, and at that point, she wasn't going to let me not do it. So I had her train me, and the process was cool. They have you train for 6 months. You actually get registered with USA Boxing as a boxer. You go through the physical and all that sort of stuff, and if you wanted to continue there to Golden Gloves or become a pro,
right,
you could. And the premise, while it's boxing, is to raise money for the 3 charities that they support each year. And I think I raised about just shy of $8,000, which was kind of cool. I'd never done fundraising before.
Wow.
But I was in the best shape of my life. I'm hoping to get back to that shape at some point. And it was an awesome experience.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay. That was different.
Yeah. Oh, so the Vortex.
Yes.
Why the name? Why the name?
Yes. You had to have some kind of name?
Well, you had to have a name.
Okay.
You had to have a name.
Don't tell me it was an engine.
It was not an engine.
Okay.
It was not an engine. So before Turn One Studio was called Turn One Studio, the company name used to be Vortex Graphics. I changed it because graphics felt just too limiting, but it was that name for 20 years. Before Vortex Graphics, in high school, I ran a bulletin board system, which was a pre-internet modem accessible server out of our house as a kid. And it was called the Vortex because that just sounded cool at the time. My cousin came up with that name, and it just kind of stuck. So it was the Vortex BBS. When I first had a DBA, it was Vortex Enterprises. I shortly after incorporated to Vortex Graphics. So it was the Vortex, the boxer.
Vortex the boxer.
Yeah.
Okay. It's better than doing wrestling. I can see you jumping off the top
I'd have to
rung.
spin or something weird, yeah.
Okay, and the last question I'll ask you and wrap this up, I guess, because we're definitely going overtime.
Yeah.
We're a couple days before Thanksgiving. What's your favorite side for Thanksgiving dinner?
Huh. My grandfather was he was in the Army. He was in the Korean War. And he was a cook in the Army. So he used to cook for lots of people, right?
Sure.
And he was an excellent cook. And he made this pan stuffing that was incredible. My cousin thankfully had the foresight to videotape Grandpa making that and some of his other things before he passed away. And my brother, who hosts Thanksgiving every year, he makes that stuffing.
Nice.
So, yeah, it's aside from it being Grandpa's, it's absolutely delicious. So, yeah, that's the answer.
All right, excellent.
Yeah.
Well, I had fun turning the tables on you.
This is cool.
This was different. So,
Thank you, man. Appreciate being on the other side of the
Well, it's
the
better than being
conversation.
on that side. This side's okay. It's easy. I ask questions all day long, so this is good.
Yeah.